Hey friends, this is Natalie Irvin, and welcome to the ICU podcast, where we explore how we can find significance in the unseen work of leaders and learn to be intentional to truly see others in our everyday lives. I can't wait to share with you, so let's get started. Today's scripture is Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Hey friends, and welcome back to the ICU podcast. I'm so excited for this interview this morning. I am with my former band director, David Vandewalker, and it's such an honor. This interview is so special to me. Dr. Vandewalker has served as the coordinator of performing arts for Fulton County Schools in Atlanta and band director at Georgia State University and Harrison High School here in Georgia. Bands under his instruction have performed in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, Bands of America Regional Championships, BOA Grand National Finals, and at the Midwest International Band and Orchestra Clinic. Dr. V currently is the executive director for the Servant Leadership Association for Music, as evaluator of the MFA National Festival, and the executive director for Conn Selmer Booster Community. Dr. V is also the recipient of the Sudler Flag of Honor, 10 MBA Citation of Excellence Awards, 3 National Wind Band Honors Awards, and is the elected member of the American Bandmasters Association. David and his wife Pamela reside in Marietta, Georgia, where she currently serves over 800 children in music each week. Whoa, that's a lot. You do a lot.
Oh, well, no, we could have gone with maybe like a 10-second hey on that one. It's okay.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so honored. I don't think I've seen you in probably 15 years.
Yeah.
And so it was really fun to show up this morning and reconnect, and we're in your beautiful home. And I just appreciate you giving me the time and just the wisdom that you have after doing so many things. I was in band with you at Harrison High School and started in 2003, I believe. Graduated in 2007.
2000, yeah.
So it's been a while, but the lessons and the leadership experience that I received under your instruction is just invaluable. And when I was thinking back, starting this podcast, I was thinking back to the most influential people in my life. And you by far were the most influential in my high school career in so many ways, but mainly in forming that leadership, drive, and passion in my heart that maybe wasn't there before and maybe wouldn't have been unless you had been there leading me. So we have so much that we could reminisce about, but
Sure.
I really wanted to focus in on who you are, how you came to be here, and then so much of the leadership experiences and lessons that you've learned. So just start by telling everybody who you are.
Wow. Well, I won't go quite back to, the toddler days, but my grandfather, my mom's father, had a great quote that stuck with me early on. He said, "We all are either products or victims of our experience and past, but only you get to choose which you'll be." And I can say that, that's certainly true and resonates with so many of us now, because we do certainly in most of our communities, and certainly we see this in Metro Atlanta, where we have such diverse communities.
Right.
But even in the small towns where I grew up, we had different lived experiences, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I grew up in a single parent home. My mom had MS, and I found a community at church, and I found a community at school through the band program. And I really feel blessed in that I could have gone down a variety of pathways, and most of them not properly, but probably the best pathway for real. But there were some key adults who invested in me and saw something in me that I certainly had no clue about. And I was just, like most of us, I got kind of bogged down in the woe's me. And that's where I go back to my grandfather's quote. There's lots for me to get bogged down in the victim.
Yeah.
But through his encouragement and that haunting voice of hearing him say that quote, I get to choose.
Right.
And I'm blessed because there were some key people, one of my directors, one of my music directors at church, and a scoutmaster saw something in me that really gave me hope, gave me a vision. And really, music became what I kind of channeled to deal with all those emotions and all the things about being a teenager, rejected by two fathers, my mom was ill, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that provided a way for me to go to college and major in music. And so for me, my goal was to be a teacher. I was inspired by my other grandfather was a band director. And so for me, my why I discovered was I wanted to motivate, inspire, and encourage others who might be like me as a child to find a new way out, to find something to take pride in that could be their source of hope into what's next.
Right.
And so for me, music was the tool to do that. So as a clinician and a professional development presenter now, I talk about the modern definition of a music educator is to be the CEO of a people-oriented small business with a serious music problem. Well, for anyone who knows me, I'm really serious about the music side of it. But I say that meaning that I really believe we are in a people business. And so that's not just to be a teacher. More times in life, we're interacting with people on some level.
Yeah.
And so I believe my goal has always been to, how can we make a difference? To be an encourager and an uplifter of those around us. Because I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have those people in my life. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I can speak to that from our time together at Harrison, that your investment in us was very clear from the beginning. As soon as we stepped foot freshman year at band camp, we knew this is the expectation, and you're going to meet it. Yeah. And I'm going to be with you. Like, I've got your back. And I remember so many times thinking, man, he is so hard on us. He's just, relentless. And I can't do what he's expecting me to do. And every time I did. And there was something in me that I wanted to make you proud. But in the end, I think looking back, it was also making me proud.
Right.
Because I was not athletic. I was not involved in a lot of extracurricular things. So when I found that passion with music, that did give me a sense of purpose and made me feel like, wow, I can contribute to something that is not me, it's bigger than me. It's a team.
Right.
And the music that we made together was just so beautiful. And it just made such a huge impact on me even as a leader too. Because you saw that in me. I don't know why, but you did. You saw that in me through maybe some resistance, through maybe, sometimes that I wanted to be lazy. That just was not an option for you. And I just kind of want to know, from your perspective, when you're leading teenagers, when you're leading young adults, how do you motivate and inspire and take that resistance and build something beautiful out of that?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. And, I think it's a journey too, because for me, I can connect it now later in my career and life experiences to Benjamin Zander. And he has a great national bestseller out there called The Art of Possibility. Be a great read for folks looking to find some inspiration in this topic. But he says as a conductor, he can do all these great gestures and make all this great passionate music and all those wonderful things. But he said ultimately his job in a performance, it's silent and it's on the performers to realize the vision, right? Yeah. So really our goal as a conductor, he says, is to awaken possibilities in others. And I think that really, for me, was at the heart of what my goal and mission was. And for me, I knew that as a student, I needed something to focus and work hard toward. And once we did, I found pride in something worthy of doing, And so when you think about Daniel Pink's book, Drive, he talks about how do we shift culture in a modern society. And he focused on three things: purpose, mastery, and autonomy. And so in that timeline, while you were in the program, I really started realizing that, yes, I was passionate about excellence and I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to provide kids an opportunity to experience something of excellence that they could find pride in. And we created the slogan, dedication, excellence, and pride, right? And so for me, how to do that, I learned through some of an early mentor in the servant leadership element with Tim Lotzenheiser, is that we had to build connections and relationships. And I had to come to the realization that, okay, well, what's going to motivate Natalie is different than the kids on either side of Natalie, right? And where you are in your journey is different. And so it's kind of like parenting, I suppose. I have thousands of children, but none of our own at home. But it's the journey has to include, if we want to be successful, of seeing each person for who they are, what their strengths are, what their isms are, what their warts are. All those things are valuable. And one of the things that burdens me, I guess, as a teacher at times is sometimes it's really easy in our profession, developing product and concerts and all that, is to see those, and I assume it's the same in corporate, in the business world, is seeing others as what value they bring to me or what their potential to make me look good is or whatever those elements. But when we really stop to see individuals and we realize, okay, boy, I don't know about this kiddo. I have to lean in a little bit to discover what's their strength, what's their level, what's their possibility.
Right.
And as a leader, that's my gig to figure that out and to help them in their journey to realize that possibility.
Right.
And for some, that takes more time than others, right? But it's about seeing and building connections and relationships enough and investing in so that we get to what I really feel like I know. I didn't connect it till years later, but I think we had a trust factor there.
Yes, for sure.
And so if I was pushing for you to reach and explore new depths, and then your realization of that, then that became a trust factor of, okay, well, I'm ready to do the next thing.
Right.
Because he's going to have my back in that journey.
Yeah. And I knew that you trusted me. So then I wanted to meet that expectation because I didn't want to let you down. I didn't want to let myself down either.
Right.
And so putting in that extra effort, I remember there were mornings where I would come in early and practice because I knew I didn't have that part ready. And you kind of set that as the expectation. You know, your peers are counting on you. This is not just a one-person gig. This is, we're a team here. So we all have to contribute our very, very best, which is our, excellence.
Right.
And it's the Aristotle quote that you had in the band room, that it's a habit. And so if we don't create these habits up front, then we're going to ultimately not contribute our best. And you were so good about pushing us, but also seeing us so that even if we were like, in the moment, we still had this love and this relationship that outlasted any of those frustrations.
Yeah.
And
and if you think about what you were just sharing there, the other part of that puzzle links back to the whole Daniel Pink. And I had never read, and this was even before that book probably even came out, but it was, you had a sense of ownership in it.
Yeah.
You had some autonomy in it, that you had an investment, that you wanted to go in early and make sure that you were there for your peers. And that was something that I did try to focus in on, is that we're in this journey together, and together we are stronger. What's that old quote of, and when tide rolls, all boats lift and rise together, something like that. I can't remember what that quote is, but together we're all going to be able to achieve something greater than we can as individuals.
Right.
And so I think that's also a key part of it, is of how do we lead and inspire others so they had that exact sense of ownership.
Yeah, responsibility.
And maybe not necessarily because you wanted to please me, while that's probably a part of it in that journey, but as you said, it also becomes, I want to make sure that I don't let my team down.
Right.
And man, isn't that something we need in society today? Where we are focusing on what we do and thinking about others instead of the I, me. We can really focus to the we, us in our daily interactions.
And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that band taught me, because I didn't go on to play after high school. I could have, and I made the choice not to, but because of the foundational skills that I learned through the band program, it launched me into so many leadership positions in college. And then from there, as an educator, I feel like has even changed my perspective when I go to teach my students, and that's constantly evolving as I grow. But, not everybody does go on to be musicians.
Right.
But what do you feel like are the main things? I mean, I think you've kind of gone over this, but just the main things you want to instill in student leaders so that when they're not with you and they move on with their lives, that they can continue to use what they've learned as an adult.
Right. And so to me, that's the biggest element, because, first I want them to love music, and I want music to be meaningful for them as adults.
Right.
But more importantly, it is the experiences. I don't remember all the titles of concerts that I conducted last year.
Right.
Right? Much less will students 6 weeks after they've given the concert. So while we want it to be motivating and inspiring, and we want it to be meaningful and touch the heart, if it's only about the music, then I think we need to reevaluate. And so what skills do we want for those who don't continue, right? We want to have that love of music, but we also want them to be focused and mindful of others, and to be, how do we think of the needs of others first? How do we, one of the great lessons from band camp on, it's how do I come alongside my peer and help them grow,
Right.
so that we as a team, that's important. How do we invest in deferred gratification? Boy, there's something that we really need in society today, right? Everything is so instantly,
Yes.
we want instant gratification. And so part of what I wanted to inspire is that the journey is valuable, and it's worth investing in the long haul.
Yeah.
And there's so little in life that builds tenacity and grit.
Yes.
Right. And so I think it's those elements that we shared together that are meaningful outside of any one context.
Right.
Can I connect and work with others? Can I have the tenacity that when I fail, I get back up and try again? My father-in-law had the patent, or his company did back then, on the glue stick. And he told me when I was working on my dissertation and I was having to go through the gazillionth rewrite, he said, most of my career was failure. And he said, I might replicate a formula 200 times before I got to the answer.
Wow.
And then we had the glue stick.
Amazing invention, by the way.
What if he had given
in elementary school?
What if he had given up after 100? Right.
Yeah.
So it's those kinds of elements. When we
Right.
think about the big picture, I want everyone to love music, and I'm passionate about that.
Absolutely.
But what can we do to be supportive, and what can we do to create community that's lasting, that we have the skills to make meaningful contributions to society moving forward?
Right. And one of the greatest, we were talking about this before we started, one of the biggest memories that I have, well, one, we went to Ireland. So how can you get any better than that? That was amazing.
That
we
was
marched
great.
in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah.
And that was just such a special way to end my senior year. That was senior year. We had a conga line and just celebrated so many great memories and accomplishments in that moment. So one of the most meaningful, I think, was when you were honored with the Sudler flag, which was huge in the band world. And we played a song that was very meaningful to you. And I just remember the emotion coming from both sides, coming from you conducting, but then also from us knowing how special it was for you, and the fact that you allowed us to play a part in that. And I still remember it to this day. And I had to ask you, though, I remembered Parallel, but I couldn't remember anything else. But explain the story behind that.
Sure. Well, I'm thinking several things as you're reminiscing on that. But I think one of the things about leadership that it's important is that we find a little bit of ourselves and we share that raw person, that the human side of things, whether it's leading the conga line in a pub in Ireland with teenagers, or if it's just, in a classroom or in a meeting. If we're having to be the leader, be the strong personality, the whatever, I think it's important that we also show a human side.
Yeah.
Whether that's acknowledging we screwed up, we blew it, or whether it's just finding those moments where we can be real with one another as a leader. I think that's important. And so another real moment for me that you were describing was an opportunity for me to give thanks, to show appreciation and honoring my grandfather, who was my sixth grade band director and taught for generations. He was an Oklahoma Bandmaster Hall of Famer. And my uncle was also, so they were father and son. And so in the Hall of Fame. So that's kind of cool. So I wanted to find a way to connect and that would truly honor him. And so we found a piece by Vaughan Williams, who was his favorite composer as a band director. And I had it was beautiful and expressive and it was meaningful to me. But then I reorchestrated it for a clarinet choir to start the opening moment to give tribute to him. And so for us, that was a way as a community to buy in and say, this is something that's meaningful to me. It goes back to being real with your team. That team was my group of students, but and sharing with that and sharing some stories along the way of why it was meaningful and life lessons he taught me. And so in that moment where we were presenting it together, it really was special because it was a beautiful piece of music, really well performed.
Yes.
But it was all of those connection points that really made it truly special and therefore memorable all these years later. So how, to me, it's, do we see people enough to share and be real in our journeys together that we can actually share moments together with purpose and have ownership in each other to create those moments rather than just walking down the street together is a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too because a lot of people who teach in high school or teach in the college setting, more high school probably, would see that as, well, these teenagers won't care or they won't be able to connect because they don't care about, sentimental things or they're not in that headspace. And I think that that's not true. And
anybody who doesn't think a teenager is emotional or can experience emotion is a little bit distracted.
We're very emotional humans as teenagers, but I think...
But so is a third grader, right?
Right. Oh, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think to your point of being real, that it does connect with them. And you can't discount their age for their ability to hold on to something that's meaningful for you. And it becomes a way to build trust, like you were talking about, when you're real and you're raw. And sometimes things are sad or sometimes things are difficult. Like being able to express that builds a relationship that is a two-way street, not just the leader and the recipient, but it's mutual trust and understanding.
Yeah, and when we see those that we look up to or that we collaborate with in different things, experiencing real emotion, then it gives us permission to. Right. I think that's important as well, and that as we experience those things, it's like, oh, okay. Or I may not be able to relate, but I can empathize. Right. And so I think that's really important in the journey. And I think it goes back to the whole Benjamin Zander thing again of awakening possibilities. And so I think what's hard as a leader is, and teacher and parent, we have a tendency to put parameters on what we think is okay for a third grader. What can a third grader do? What can this ninth grader do? What can this child do musically? Or what can this child do from a writing and creating something expressive in creative writing or whatever? We tend to put parameters on, well, they can only do that at this age. Yeah. Well, if we're really looking at awakening possibility, then that means we're not telling them what's hard. We're not, that's one of the, I mean, we played music that was way beyond what you should have been able to play in lots of ways. And not to mention the marching band side where you had to like march 3 steps per second backwards while you did it. But it's because we were exploring our possibilities, never limiting and celebrating in what we could just achieve just because of that limitation. Always exploring what's possible and empowering that, I think, is important.
And oftentimes that's way beyond what you could have even imagined
Exactly.
in the first place.
Yeah.
Because I remember just looking at that music when we would first get our music for marching band, and there was always a woodwind feature.
Yeah.
So I always knew what was coming. And every time I was like, nope, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. And every time we did it. And it ended up being excellent and incredible. And then we could take so much pride in, holy moly, like we did something so impressive.
Yeah. And it was a journey, though. It was a 3-month process.
Absolutely.
Of where are we? Where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? Those are 3
Yes.
questions of my mantra. But in that moment, where are we? Well, it's not very good. Where do we want to be? We want it to be great. Well, what are we going to do to get
Come in
there?
early.
And that means today, tomorrow, next week. Do we lose our temper? Do we need a skill set that we need to acquire? Do we need to be more patient and loving? Whatever where are we, where do we want to be? It goes back to what we were talking about. Well, where we want to be, how are we going to get there? Often is through that grit, tenacity, and long term. And I think in today's moments, we don't always give ourselves enough time and grace to fail and explore, fail and explore,
That's so true.
fail and explore.
Yeah. And so for this generation, it's a little bit different. Things have changed, post-pandemic and even just time in general. And there are a lot of people students, adults, who don't want to be pushed. They want to kind of go at their own pace. They want to do their own thing. They refer to leadership as toxic in some circumstances. So how do you approach it with working with adults, working with students, no matter what age group, to where pushing and continuing to explore the possibilities, not just accept what is, how do you lead with that type of environment?
Yeah, certainly the pandemic has illuminated many things, and they've been augmented for sure in that manner. I think accountability throughout the ages has been difficult for the human spirit to deal with, right? I mean, certainly Scripture shows that, right? I mean, that's our intrinsic nature is to resist or to think that we can do it our own way or that I have the right to do it the way I want. Right. And so, I think that how we go about leading impacts that even more. I certainly could make expectations and how I went about guiding that 10 years ago, 15 years ago was easier on some level. I could be just more direct and assertive, and society norms and whatever responded okay with that in some way. But at the same time, when we were talking about the different elements and how much time and intensity we were involved in together, if there wasn't some love and there wasn't some of that trust and there wasn't all of that as a part of it, then what I was discovering is, then the amount of level of effort that individuals would be willing to commit to that was less. So that's part of what drew me as a leader to those elements and to those methods, if you will, because there's only so much you can push the human spirit, right? So, but if I could make connection points and bring you along in my journey with me, then it became more your idea as much as it was my idea. And so to me, I think in current society, how we guide folks that are struggling with that really goes to the heart of the podcast of do we see individuals? I think that's more important. Before we could probably get away with generalizing and seeing the group, and it would work for higher percentage of the group.
Right.
But now it needs to be, okay, well, one of the things that we're talking about in crafting culture with the Servant Leadership Association for Music is, okay, well, identifying and seeing your students or seeing people on your team, if we're going to craft culture, then we need to see them enough to go, okay, well, are they a queen bee? They're going to be productive. They're going to be a leader. They're going to be motivated intrinsically already, or are they going to be the worker ant who's ready to work hard and tenacious, but needs a little bit of different guiding and directing and nurturing in that way? Or are they even the caterpillar? Are they a little slow bloomer, or are they needing some reinforcement and some nurturing so that they can reach that beautiful butterfly moment? And then every once in a while we all work with a few people that are just probably ticks, right? They just want to suck the life out of you. Yeah. Well, maybe we can let them on their journey on their own. I don't know, but I think how we approach folks and see folks matters in that context of guiding them and directing them and making sure that, even going back to this Simon Sinek stuff of making sure we're articulating our why and that we're making what we do purposeful so that we can guide folks in our journey with us. One of the things that the gentleman we've already talked about, Tim Lotzenheiser, used to say is if we come alongside and bring someone with us. And I feel like today, more than ever, we have to do more of that. Yeah. Because there is the resistance and that leadership in general is toxic. And you know what? Some of it was and some of it is. And we've needed to evolve, I think. And so I think if we focus more on how can I see who they are, explore their realm of possibility, and lead in a way that feels like they're coming along and being empowered versus guided, directed, and told. Right? I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No, it does. It does. I mean, it's two different leadership strategies, which I think, in my profession, public education, just in general, is difficult at times. And I think a lot of people have a hard time leading such a vast variety of personalities and people. And I think one thing that band has taught me, and the experiences I had in college in leadership has taught me, is that it's not about us. We can't look at ourselves. We've got to have an outward perspective of what's best for the team. I might not like that. It might not be my first preference, but where do I need to lead my team so that we can be the most influential, the most successful, so that we can impact students at the greatest level. Right. Regardless of if it takes extra time on us, regardless of if we're getting paid for the amount of time we're spending to make sure students are successful. I think that instant gratification is what so many people desire. But like you said, it's a journey that we're going on together, and we want our kids to come alongside us. We want our kids to be participants and have ownership in that journey. But if we're just looking at what's best for us or what we've always done, it's not going to work. Yeah. It's not going to be successful.
Yeah, and I just heard something recently. We were talking about work-life balance. It's such a thing now, right? Is. And it's important. It's really important. Right. But like work-life balance isn't going to be equal. Right. Balance does not necessarily mean equal. And most things that achieve greatness don't happen out of things being equal. Right? Achieving something great takes hard work. Yeah. What's the phrase out there now with 10,000 hours to achieve mastery on something? Well, you got to find balance, but balance isn't going to come in equal. But it's about finding what matters and brings you joy and making sure you're seeking that out while you're doing the other grit elements. And when you think about even what you're talking about of building your team, when you think about the people-oriented small business, well, what does a business do? What does a corporation do? They have job descriptions and they have very specific qualifications and skill sets that they want, and they build a team utilizing all those different varieties of skill sets to create the highest functioning operational unit they can create. Right. Well, then our goal is to get to know and see people enough that we see what value they can bring and how do we nurture them into the journey with us so that they feel gratification and reward in what they have to offer, that is their best version of themselves in that journey, so that they feel it's what they aspire to do in the ownership element, as opposed to, I have to do that because my boss or my whatever team leader is telling me I have to. Because all of us, when we're told to do something, we kind of have that moment where if we can be invited or inspired to explore something and what might be the benefit if we did, that's a whole different perspective.
Right.
At least maybe it's just me, but
No, I think you're onto something with that for sure. And just kind of switching directions as we close it out, you and your wife have done some really, really great work with children's ministry, children's music over the past, 15, 20 years. And I just found out about a lot of those details when we talked this morning. And I just want you to kind of expand on what you guys are doing to take the gospel globally for kids specifically.
Well, we've had a blessing. My wife is a children's music specialist in a large metro church here in Atlanta, and a brilliant writer. She's a Dove Award winner with God Made Me Special in a collaboration with VeggieTale team and that kind of stuff. So we have been blessed to have an opportunity to just create, and she's had an opportunity to grow and think about how do we use music as a tool for ministry and for just impacting families. And so we created Teeny Tykes and Tunes as a faith-based early childhood program where caregivers, moms, dads, grandparents can come together with their kids when they're young. And what we know statistically is that we used to think 10 years developmentally, but now children's minds are hardwired, their brains are hardwired by age 3 or 4.
Wow.
So if we can take music, and here's the other part, anything that is learned or taught through music, the way the brain receives all of that, and the way the neuroplasticity happens is music hardwires it through the myelin process. And so, how do most of us learn the ABCs?
Right.
A, B, C, D. Right. It's that music that guides that. So if we could create a program that average mom, average dad could engage their children in using music and combining music and spiritual and playful and creative and working on all the spatial intelligence and all the different elements as an educator and researcher, the doctorate in music education, we've got to make sure we do all those wonderful things, right? So with all that there, how we wrap that in a bow that a layperson can share it. And so we were blessed to meet our good brother Solomon, who is the chaplain for all of the Olympic athletes for the continent of Africa. And he brought us to Nairobi, and we had the blessing of sharing with the first trip over 300 adults of how to use music. Music doesn't exist in the schools, and there's no formalized education in the schools in Africa before class 1 or first grade. And so we've been able over the last few years, we created, there's my, sorry about that. I'm sure the editor will be happy to take that out. But anyway, as we look at Teeny Tykes and Tunes, and we developed, because their market was more Sunday school, and how do we create that? We created Teeny Tykes and Tunes Africa. And now we've gifted that to a distributor there on the continent, and it's been shared in, I think, 9 countries in Africa. Wow. And then the other version of it is on all 5 of the 7 continents. So what a blessing to be able to share and help others and empower others where they are in their community to use music as a teaching tool. And hopefully, from our perspective and a ministry perspective, is to hardwire those songs of the faith, those scripture meanings. So everything has a scripture story, and using music in different ways to learn, so that if they wander later, we know it's hardwired there. And we know they won't understand all of the doctrinal elements as a 3-year-old, but it's hardwired so that when they are able, they'll have it. Yeah. And through the work of the Holy Spirit, they can take that and draw upon those scriptures, draw upon those things. And for families out there, another something that we didn't talk about that I'd love to just share without your permission, I guess. But
no. Go ahead.
is Pamela, we've collaborated with one of her former students in her children's choirs growing up, is an incredible artist and illustrator, and Michael Miyako. And he's created, and through Pamela's work, we created a family devotional book called Full of Feelings, Devotions for Emotions, so that families can go through 26 biblical characters and biblical stories to deal with the emotion of I'm afraid, and there's music attached to it. And how do we go through this a biblical character that's afraid? So when we're scared and we're afraid as a child, how do we deal with that as a family and talk about that from a spiritual? And now we've got fear not, for I am with you.
I love it.
Be not afraid. So we've got that hardwired for that moment. So anyway, those are just some cool things. Thanks for asking about those.
That's
elements
beautiful.
of opportunities to try to help use music as a teaching tool, but to get it hardwired for life.
And it's so powerful. I know that our girls love worship music, and Harper, anytime we don't have music on, she's like, Mom, can you tell Alexa to play XYZ? And, that's something that's always been very helpful for me. Worship music is very powerful for me. And so I think the fact that you're taking that and understanding the science behind why that's effective for kids who, in the United States that need to hear the gospel, but also globally that may not ever have that opportunity, you're taking Jesus to them in a way that they can connect with. And I just think that is so beautiful. And the devotional, is it out, released?
Yeah, it's an interactive PDF right now on Amazon. You can search it out there. Pamela Vandewalker, Full of Feelings. Yeah,
I love that.
Also
Our house is full of feelings. I can tell you that.
Isn't it, right? So that's why we felt like that was a meaningful project. Yeah. And again, Michael takes each of those characters and we see a facial expression. And so it gives us a chance to connect. So anyway, yeah, we're really happy to have that to offer folks.
That's so great. So I always ask this of my guests, and I forgot to tell you this at the time, but I think you can answer it. I always ask, since this is the ICU podcast, how have you felt seen recently?
I think we go through stages of life, right? And I, like many, felt seen through the lens of my occupation and my role, and shifting maybe 12 years ago now, seems like can't possibly be that long ago, out of my role at Harrison into a different role, and then shifting again a couple more times. While I know it spiritually, certainly, that my value in self isn't tied to that, it's really easy to get caught up in that, right? And so for me, it's I want to be seen and have been seen now in this stage of my career of giving back and mentoring the next generation and trying to empower the next generation of teachers to consider how they do what they do so that it has more meaning in these types of discussions that we're having. And so having moments more recently to be seen in that way by younger teachers, and that's been meaningful for me. And so, it's not having that audience every day, or so to speak, is a little different while I'm, like many now, working at home and consulting and doing those kinds of things. My cat Pierre sees me every day. I'm not sure quite how he sees me, but I've enjoyed the opportunity to be seen as someone to invest in the next generation.
Yeah. Well, and I thank you so much for what you have done and what you're doing now. I think it's incredible. And I saw a Facebook post recently by one of the band students that was with me in band. And he was talking about how he had recently gone to a wind ensemble concert at Kennesaw State. And you may have seen this. Yeah. And just how he realized as he was crying through the music, how much he took for granted his time being under your instruction and being under the instruction of Dr. Phillips as well. And just, I think when we become adults, we see things so much more clearly of the investment and the power of investment. And you certainly did that for me. And I can't thank you enough. I mean, it just really shaped foundational cores of who I am as a person and as a leader. And so this has just been an honor. And I look forward to seeing what you and Pamela will continue to do as the power couple that you are.
Well, the honor is mine. It's great to reconnect. And anytime we can come together and see how we can make a difference in the lives of people is time well spent, I think. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And the ICU podcast will be released every Friday. So I hope that you found some encouragement from this talk, that you can leave this episode just feeling empowered to see others and to really invest in others and the impact that that can make.